The Zephyrian diplomatic shuttle. Gentle breeze drifted silently through the asteroid field, its hull gleaming like polished pearl against the cosmic void. Ambassador Kethvar adjusted his ceremonial robes for the third time in as many minutes, his 4 arms trembling slightly with nervous energy. This was supposed to be a simple diplomatic mission: negotiate mining rights with the notoriously aggressive Krex Empire, sign the papers, and return home with honor intact. What they hadn't counted on was the human. Captain Marcus Chen sat in the co-pilot's seat, his weathered face displaying that peculiar human expression the Zephyrians had learned to fear. Mild interest mixed with what their translators could only render as creative problem-solving mode. His fingers drummed against his thigh in a rhythm that somehow made the entire diplomatic corps nervous. "Captain Chen," Ambassador Kethvar ventured, "I must remind you that your role here is purely observational. The Galactic Council specifically requested human presence to, what was the phrase, provide perspective on conflict resolution." Marcus turned those unsettling blue eyes toward the ambassador. "Don't worry, Ambassador. I'm just here to watch and learn." The phrase sent a collective shudder through the Zephyrian delegation. In their 2 years of knowing humans, they'd discovered that just watching often preceded the most spectacular disasters in galactic history. The shuttle's proximity alarms began chiming as they approached the designated rendezvous point, a heavily fortified Krex battle station wedged between 2 massive asteroids. The station bristled with enough firepower to level a small moon, its blood-red hull scarred by countless battles. Weapons platforms tracked their approach with mechanical precision. "Zephyrian vessel," crackled the comm system in the guttural Krex language. "State your business or be destroyed. Ambassador." Kethvar straightened his robes and activated the translation matrix. "Greetings, mighty Krex Empire. I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Republic, here for the scheduled mining rights negotiation." "You are late. This shows disrespect. Perhaps we should negotiate with your corpses instead." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Friendly bunch." "Captain, please," whispered the ambassador's aide fell then. "The Krex consider any interruption during formal communications to be a grave insult." The human shrugged. "Good to know." As their shuttle was tractored into the docking bay, Marcus observed the organized chaos of Krex military efficiency. Soldiers in powered armor stomped through corridors lined with weapons. Battle-scarred fighters hung from maintenance scaffolds like sleeping predators. Everything was designed to intimidate, to project overwhelming force. "Subtle," Marcus murmured. The delegation was escorted through corridors that reeked of ozone and aggression to a vast negotiation chamber. War Chieftain Drakmor awaited them, a towering figure whose scarred carapace told stories of 100 battles. Behind him stood an honor guard of the most intimidating warriors the Krex could muster. "Zephyrians," Drakmor's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You come seeking our asteroid belt. We have decided the price has changed." Ambassador Kethvar's translator rendered the new terms, and his skin paled to a sickly lavender. The Krex weren't just asking for triple the agreed-upon price. They wanted exclusive Zephyrian technology, permanent military access to Zephyrian space, and what amounted to vassalage. "War Chieftain," Kethvar began diplomatically, "surely we can find terms more agreeable to both parties." "The terms are final," Drakmor snarled. "Accept, or we take what we want by force." The honor guard's weapons hummed to life. The diplomatic mission had just become a hostage situation. That's when Marcus stood up. "Excuse me," he said conversationally, but I couldn't help noticing something. Every Krek's weapon swiveled toward him. Drakmore's eyes blazed with fury. "The human speaks. Without permission. This insult demands blood." "Actually," Marcus continued, seemingly oblivious to the dozen energy rifles pointed at his chest, "I was wondering about your defensive grid, specifically why you've positioned your primary weapons platforms in a Kepler configuration around the station." Drakmore paused, confusion replacing rage. "What?" "The Kepler configuration," Marcus explained helpfully. "Named after an old Earth astronomer. See, when you arrange defensive platforms in overlapping elliptical patterns like you have, it creates fascinating mathematical relationships. Beautiful, really. Also completely vulnerable to cascade resonance failures." The war chieftain's mandibles clicked uncertainly. "You speak nonsense, human." Marcus pulled out what appeared to be a simple data pad. Standard human technology, harmless by galactic standards. "Mind if I show you? I'm something of a math enthusiast." Before anyone could object, Marcus tapped the pad. Throughout the station, a low harmonic tone began to build. "You see," Marcus continued conversationally as the tone grew stronger, "human, mathematicians figured out centuries ago that any symmetrical defensive grid has natural resonant frequencies. Find the right frequency and—" He shrugged. "Well, physics does the rest." The station began to vibrate. Warning lights flashed as the harmonic tone intensified. Through the chamber's viewports, they could see the weapons platforms beginning to oscillate in their mountings. "What have you done?" Drakmore roared. "Cascade resonance failure," Marcus explained cheerfully. "Your weapons grid is essentially one big musical instrument. I just played the right note. Should disable your entire defensive network in about 30 seconds. The Krek's honor guard aimed their weapons, but Drakmore raised a restraining hand. Through the viewports, they watched in horrified fascination as the station's mighty weapons platforms shook themselves apart in perfect mathematical harmony. "The beautiful thing about mathematics," Marcus continued, "is that it's universal. Doesn't matter if you're human Kreks or sentient jellyfish, physics works the same way everywhere." As the last weapons platform tore itself apart, the station fell silent except for the wail of damage alarms. "Now then," Marcus said, settling back into his chair, "I believe you were discussing mining rights. The original terms sounded quite reasonable." War Chieftain Drakmore stared at the human with what could only be described as newfound respect tinged with absolute terror. In the space of 5 minutes, this soft-looking biped had casually dismantled the most powerful military installation in 3 sectors using nothing but mathematics and a data pad. The original terms are acceptable," Drakmore managed. Ambassador Kethvar, his skin now a color that didn't exist in any known spectrum, somehow found his voice. "Excellent. Shall we proceed with the paperwork?" As they departed the crippled station an hour later, mining rights secured and treaty signed, Felden finally worked up the courage to speak. "Captain Chen, how did you know about the resonance frequencies?" Marcus smiled that terrifying human smile. "I didn't. But I figured if I was wrong, we weren't going to be any worse off than we already were." The Zephyrian delegation sat in stunned silence as this revelation sank in. The human hadn't just walked into danger and made it worse. He'd turned catastrophic failure into a backup plan. Ambassador Kethvar made a mental note to recommend that all future diplomatic missions include a human observer. After all, when negotiating with hostile aliens, it helped to have someone whose idea of problem-solving involved casually threatening to physics entire space stations to death. The gentle breeze departed the asteroid field, leaving behind one very confused Krex empire and several dozen weapons platforms that would need to be rebuilt with entirely new mathematical principles. In the end, the Zephyrians reflected, they were beginning to understand why the rest of the galaxy found humans so unsettling. It wasn't their aggression or their technology, it was their ability to look at any situation and somehow make it simultaneously better and infinitely more terrifying. The human, meanwhile, was already pulling out his data pad again, humming softly to himself as he calculated the resonant frequencies of their next diplomatic destination.